Hey Lake Point, Pastor Mike here to get you caught up on the third week of our series, Bless. A series focused around relational evangelism. A series where we're looking at 5 everyday ways to love your neighbor and change the world. And the big idea that we looked at this week was that to bless people, Jesus invites you to actually eat with them. Which may not sound spiritual, but eating a meal with someone is the best way to get to know someone, and it's one of the most natural ways to do so. Much of Jesus' ministry centered around meals. I mean, think about it. He performed his first miracle at a wedding feast. One of his most well-known miracles was feeding the 5,000 on a hill in the countryside. The night before his crucifixion, he brought his closest friends together for a meal, and after his resurrection, he shared breakfast on the beach with his disciples. In the book of Luke alone, there are 10 stories of Jesus dining with various people. As Nate shared, eating was central to Jesus' mission. An example of this is found in the book of Matthew. It's a story of when Jesus ate with a tax collector. And what makes this story fascinating is that the tax collector in the story that Matthew writes about is actually himself. It's Matthew. And so we read the story in Matthew chapter 9, verse 9. It says this: Passing along, Jesus saw a man at his work collecting taxes. His name was Matthew. Jesus said, "Come along with me." Matthew stood up and followed him. Later, when Jesus was eating supper at Matthew's house with his close followers, a lot of disreputable characters came and joined him. To understand what a big deal this was, you first have to understand the significance of eating in Jesus' culture. It's different than in the 21st century where we just kind of scarf down fast food. Back in the first century Middle Eastern culture, eating was a statement of association. To eat with someone was to affirm that person's value, dignity, and worth. Who you ate with indicated who you loved and who you considered to be a part of your social class. It's why religious leaders never ate with sinners. That would be unacceptable in their society. Yet here you have Jesus not only eating with a tax collector, Matthew, who most Jews regard as the greatest traitors and sinners, but he's also eating with a bunch of other social outcasts, something no respectable rabbi would do, which explains why the religious leaders kind of responded in the way that they did. You can check it out in verse 11. It says, when the Pharisees saw him keeping this kind of company, they had a fit and lit into Jesus' followers. What kind of example is this from your teacher acting cozy with crooks and misfits? And so Jesus overhears the religious leaders laying into his disciples, and so he decides to respond, and this is what he says. He says, "Who needs a doctor, the healthy or the sick? Go figure out what this scripture means. I'm after mercy, not religion. I'm here to invite outsiders, not coddle insiders." And the Pharisees were famous for knowing the scriptures inside and out. They memorized every word and took great pride in seeking to perfectly live out God's commands, but they failed to understand God's heart. Case in point, in their attempt to be holy, they disregard the poor and the marginalized. For the Pharisees, their first priority was obedience to the laws, but for Jesus, it was actually blessing people. It's why Jesus came. He came to show grace and mercy and not just hope people would find their way back to God, but to actually help them find their way back to God. Jesus so frequently ate with sinners so much that he was accused of being one of them. It's why the religious leaders nicknamed Jesus a friend of sinners, and they meant it as an insult, but apparently Jesus liked it so much that he actually kept it. Think about it, that Jesus embraced the nickname friend to sinners because it described his mission to befriend and bless people. So, why did Jesus spend so much of his time eating with people? Well, for starters, eating breaks down walls. I mean, think about it. In our fast-paced society, we're often too busy to truly know people, but slowing down to the point where you're sitting across from a person over a shared meal causes us to prioritize relationship building. Likewise, eating together creates the right posture of the heart. Have you ever noticed how on social media we're so quick to judge and criticize other people? Not nearly as easy to do when you're actually sitting directly across from them, especially when you're eating a meal together. The very nature of eating requires you to listen. Now, you might be thinking, I'd like to engage in this third practice of bless. I'd love to share meals with people, but here's why I can't. And so to get ahead of the excuses that we all come up with for why we can't eat a meal with other people, Nate actually took time to poke holes in the excuses that we are tempted to use from time to time. And so the first excuse number 1 is, I don't like to have people in my home. For example, you might be like, I'm not much of a cook. I don't like to eat my own food, let alone ask someone else to eat it. Or you might say, I don't really feel good about the way my house looks. We don't even really have a nice table to sit at. And if you don't like to have people in your home, like, that's okay. Eat out. Or if you can't cook, order in. Remember, this is the crux of it. It's not about what you're eating or even where you're eating it. It's about who you are eating with. Another common excuse that people use is I wouldn't know what to say. For a lot of us, hosting guests, it doesn't really come naturally. Yet, eating provides us with a great opportunity to live out the gift of listening to other people. And so instead of worrying about what you will say, think about what you can learn about the other person by listening. When you ask good questions, people love to talk. 4 kind of helpful categories of questions to remember are history, like where did you grow up? How did you meet your spouse? You've got questions of heart, like what's your favorite restaurant? What's your favorite sports team? Your vacation destination of choice? What's your habit? Like what do you like to do in your free time? And finally, what are your hurts? Like what struggles have you had to overcome in life? Plus, if you follow up any of those questions with the phrase, tell me more about that, the majority of the time people are going to have no problem opening up to you. The third excuse you will be tempted to make is this: I just don't have the time. Life is busy, I get it, especially if you have a family. Finding the time to eat with people outside of your home can seem daunting, but here's the good thing about eating. All of us already do it. Eating is already on our schedules. Most of us find time to eat at least 2, if not 3 times every day. And if you count coffee and dessert social, that's potentially 28 time slots in a week. The idea behind Eat and Bless is that you include someone else in something you are already doing. That somebody else being the people in your life, that somebody else being the people in your life that you are already praying for. Well, friends, consider yourselves caught up. Enjoy working through discussion questions, and remember, you're blessed to be a blessing.